we've gathered together some of the best hatchbacks to buy in 2025 to compare their interior practicality, infotainment tech, and boot space to help you figure out which is best for you. Now, while the Ford Fiesta and the Vauxhall Corsa have always been popular with new drivers, these days they are so grown up that they're going to be great choices for anyone of any experience. Now, while Ford doesn't sell the Fiesta anymore, it is still a very, very good car. So much so, in fact, that of this end of the hatchback segment, I'd say this is actually still my favourite car. And, well, I don't need to talk you through the design of it because you'll no doubt have seen a ton of these on the road, although I don't think you'd have seen many in this colour. Cherry red's quite cool, isn't it? Now, the Ford Fiesta interior is very familiar to me because I used to run one of these cars, and well, even though that was several years ago, I have to admit, even with a 2025 hat on, this cabin is still a very nice place to be, and it's largely because of the ergonomics. While it's not the most impressive to look at, the buttons are big and chunky and you've got dials and switches where you want them to be. It's just so easy to get used to a Ford Fiesta, and that'll be true whether you go for a petrol one like this, the mild hybrid, or even if you go for the sporty ST. But this car, this is a high trim Vignale, which means on top of all that usefulness and the good ergonomics, you've also got a sprinkling of premium as well, which is why we've got these very nice seats with part leather, and we've also got bits of leather elsewhere in the cabin too. It feels like it's been uplifted, but fundamentally this is still just a very sensible, comfortable Fiesta. And happily, that's kind of true in the back as well. The rear seats, while of course this is not a big car, they're not full of space, it's actually quite good. We've got good headroom and okay footroom as well. Now, unlike the car that has effectively replaced it in Ford's lineup, the Puma, we don't have any kind of hidden away underfloor storage in the Fiesta. Although in this particular car, we've got a spare wheel, and they're quite rare these days. If you don't have a spare wheel, of course, you can use that space, but really, because this floor is quite low in this car, you've got a good amount of space above it. Where the Fiesta is a little weaker versus its rivals is in the width of the boot. It's a bit narrower here because you've got these chunky sections there. So it's not the biggest, but big enough. Unlike the Ford Fiesta, Vauxhall still makes the Corsa, and in fact, we have driven the latest version of the car, so click the link on screen for the review of that. But today we're showing you the pre-update car, and well, even though it doesn't have the squared front end, it's slightly rounder, it still looks really good. I think it's aging very nicely indeed. Inside the Corsa, it's actually more spacious than you might have expected, and that's partly because in this car we don't have a manual gear lever. This is an automatic petrol. Although you can get a manual, you can also get a diesel, and if you go for the e-Corsa, you can get an electric car as well. But whatever you go for, you're going to get relatively similar dashboards here. You're going to get cars that have an infotainment screen here, an infotainment system that is pretty good, but it's far from the best out there and far from the most intuitive. Although, crucially, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto to fix that. And you also get a digital instrument cluster here, which is again quite basic, but at least it's clear to read on the move. Storage space is okay for a car this size, and I like the fun flashes of colour. This one's got body colour on the dash here, and the seats as well, they're quite fun. And actually the seating position is pretty good. You're comfortable and all body shapes should fit quite nicely. Although contrastingly in the back, you're pretty slim on space. It's expected that you're not going to have tons of knee room, but it is really snug when it comes to headroom for me. Now, of course, this car isn't that big, but its boot is surprisingly large actually because it's quite wide. It means if your items are this way along, well, they're going to fit quite comfortably. And actually the depth is pretty good for this class as well. And because we don't have a spare wheel under here, under the floor, it's a bit messy, but you could theoretically throw more items in there if you didn't go for that spare bit of rubber. Now, if that Fiesta and Corsa weren't quite fun enough for you, here is a Peugeot 208 with a lot more character. I mean, look at the design of this model, even in this yellow. It has all these marks of like aggression and sportiness, and that actually carries over into the interior. But before I show you that, I should say, you probably noticed the little green stripe on this car, and that's because this is the E208. But of course, you can still get a petrol and a diesel as well, if that's your thing. But the interior to me seems best suited to the electric version, and that is because that's the nippiest one of the lot. Although I have to admit, it doesn't matter which engine or powertrain you choose, you're going to really like the cabin of this 208. It definitely feels much more interesting than the other two Super Minis here. And that's because Peugeot's mix buttons and actual functionality with raciness. So we've got fake carbon fibre on the dash, we've got these claw-like switches here, and we've also got carbon fibre to rest your hand on with the gear selector. The seating position is great, and I very much like the holographic digital instrument cluster ahead of me here. It's an effect, it's obviously not really a hologram, but from behind the wheel, it looks pretty cool. The infotainment system is, okay, not the most intuitive, but at the same time, it is is slightly better than the one you get in the Corsa. And that's interesting because these cars actually share a lot of parts. Although when you look at the seats in this car, this particular one is a GT, so it feels much racier, much sportier, and yet you don't have to sacrifice on creature comforts. There's still enough storage in here and some nifty bits as well to hide away your phone too. In the back, however, it is very, very cramped. This is the problem with this platform. It's shared, as I said, with the Corsa. So if you're sitting in the back, you're not going to want to be there for a very long time. It's fine for kids, but well, I definitely didn't fit. Now, because this is the electric E208, we don't have something that you would get in a bespoke electric car, and that is lots of space underneath to store cables. Instead, you've got a tiny amount of room there. You're not going to be able to put your cables there, so they're going to have to live up here. But actually, for such a small car, this is a good sized boot. Not only is it quite long, it goes quite far back, but it's quite wide as well. And of course, if you go for the petrol or the diesel ones, you'll have even more space because there's no batteries under the floor. Now, you might have heard some people on the internet complain about the 208s, Fiestas and Corsas' use of wet belt tech in their engines, which they say hampers reliability. But truth is, so long as cars are serviced correctly and as frequently as they're supposed to be, and in particular, oil changes are not neglected, wet belt cars are perfectly reliable. And we should know, because we sell thousands of them each month with a free 90-day warranty. Did you know that the MG4 is actually the third best-selling electric car in Britain? So here, amongst these hatchbacks, it's actually the best-selling EV overall. And well, I can see why. Not only does it look great in this orange colour, but also it's got some fantastic design details. But more importantly, it's priced very, very well. And that's true when it's new, and it's especially true when you find them used. These are absolute bargains. And yet, well, the quality of this car is unquestionable, and especially when you look inside at just how much room there is. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a plush car. I mean, it is quite plasticky in here, but overall the fit and finish is really good. And you've also got lots of functionality. You've got buttons where you want them to be, and you've got loads of storage room as well, because look, this is all vacant here. You can put big mugs in there if you need. Plus, you've got a gear selector up here, which is nice and tidy, and the digital stuff works quickly, is clear to use, and well, it's just good. Also, these seats are nice and comfortable, and I've got loads of room around me. You feel like there's plenty of space above you, and that is true if you're in the back as well. This is quite a big hatchback, but it feels even bigger when you're inside. Because this MG4 is a bespoke EV, i.e. you can't get a petrol version or a diesel version, it is only battery powered, it means you get one advantage, which is something you don't see in a lot of electric cars, and that is underfloor storage. Now, I'm not going to lie, it's not massive, but it is enough to hide away these fiddly things, which is going to please a lot of people. And above it, well, this is a wide car, this is a big boot, of course, and it goes quite far back. So for shopping and even for suitcases, this is a plentiful space. Of course, if rear space isn't a concern for you, there are two very fashionable options that are much better suited to squeezing into tight spaces. There's the Mini Cooper, which is arguably the most fun infotainment system and interior of any hatchback currently on sale, albeit with a small rear bench and boot. And then there's the Fiat 500, which is obviously tiny, but packs a heck of a lot of character. You might by contrast think the Volkswagen Golf prioritizes functionality over form, but the latest Mark 8 is actually a sharp looker both outside and in. Its interior is practical and easy to live with too, once you get used to fiddly heater controls, and boot space is generous. Although if space is your priority, the Honda Civic is a real hatchback champ, one that's also available in very racy Type R form. Look at that wing. When it comes to Brits and hatchbacks, the most desirable come from the big three German marques. And while the A3, the A-Class and the 1 Series are all brilliant premium offerings, there are key differences that set them apart. And I'm going to show you them right now, starting with the Audi A3, which is arguably the sharpest looking of this German trio, partially because it's got cool angular headlights and some pretty cool lights on the rear as well, but also because it has this high-tech feeling. And this particular car really adds to that because it's actually the plug-in hybrid A3. So that means you've got a petrol cap at the back and then you've got a charger cap at the front here. And while you can get the other German models in plug-in hybrid forms too, I think this might be my favorite from that world because it is the most refined plug-in hybrid powertrain I've driven in this class. Although, when you're talking about tech, Audis really shine on the inside. Now, I actually think the interior of this Audi A3 perfectly mixes functionality, tech, and also just cool design because, well, firstly, check out this steering wheel. Normally steering wheels have flat bottoms, but this is a proper round one that's nice and sporty with perforated leather. And the whole dash itself is all angled towards the driver, so you feel pretty special. The seats as well in this model here are really lovely. But it's the tech that actually really is easy to live with. Audi's tech is fast reactive and you get wireless connection to your phone, of course, plus you get a couple of USB-C ports. But it's the way it just responds and the way it looks that makes you remember you're in a really cool Audi model. The same goes for the screen ahead of you there. And actually up front, it's comfortable enough and it's functional enough that you can do sensible things. You can store stuff easily all around you. But in the back, well, it's actually spacious enough, quite easily so actually, for 4 people. And for 5 people, you just squeeze them in. But interestingly, you don't always get USB ports to charge stuff in the back. You'll have to make sure you go for a model with the right tech pack, which is a bit of a letdown in a high-tech Audi. Although this A3 does fight back because in the boot we actually have a decent amount of space. It's a nice wide boot here as well, and it goes quite deep. Plus the floor has a protective plastic bit in the front and there's only a small drop off as well. Although, because this is the plug-in hybrid model, if you lift up the floor expecting lots of space, all you're going to find is not a lot of space because that's where all the electrics are. You're going to have to go for the petrol or the diesel model to get the best of the A3 boot. Although, you know what? This isn't the best boot here right now, because the Mercedes A-Class offers a slightly more practical boot, but it does come at a cost, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But first, let's look at this car's design, because of the 3 Germans here, this is definitely the most elegant. And it also feels like it's shouting about its premiumness the most, because there are Mercedes badges everywhere. And while you don't get as many badges inside this A-Class, you do get a lot of shiny things. And I think that's because Mercedes wants you to feel special when you're behind the wheel. And certainly it is a very different interior to any of the other cars here today. I mean, look at the size of these vents. They do serve a purpose, of course. They're nicely positioned to keep you warm on a cold day or cool on a hot day. And of course, this is a functional interior where it needs to be. I mean, we've got storage room all over the cabin, and we've also got a nice fast reacting infotainment system. And it can also be controlled by Mercedes' touchpad down here, which is quite cool. I have to say though, if you want your car to come with wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, make sure you go for one with that optioned on. Otherwise, you'll get it as standard, but you will need to plug your phone in. I also love in this particular car, the racy seats you get. They really set this interior apart and make it feel not just premium, but also pretty sporty. It is a bit snug in the back, and while you can get 2 people in there comfortably, having 3 would be a bit of a squeeze. And that's because the space has been used in the boot. If you open the boot of the Mercedes A-Class, you will spot that we actually have a little bit more space when it comes to this stuff. So if you've got wide items, it's going to be the easier one to load. And because this is the petrol A-Class, we've also got a little bit of underfloor storage, although not tons of the stuff. If, like me, you like your hatchbacks a bit sportier, this BMW 1 Series may be the one for you. I mean, look how racy it looks on the exterior. It's got these big front grills, it's got these massive brakes, and also at the back, it has something unique in this trio, which is a real exhaust pipe poking out. And that's despite the fact that this is a sensible diesel. Of course, you can also get a 1 Series in petrol and plug-in hybrid form, but whatever version you go for, you're always going to get a lovely 1 Series interior. And actually, this is a merit of going for the older car than the very latest one, because you get this iDrive controller down here. If you go for the new one, you won't get that. But having this means it's much easier to control the infotainment system when you're on the go. You can use the touchscreen, but this is just better. Also, the tech itself is very good in this car. It's nice and intuitive, and the interior itself is functional. There's plenty of storage space, and these seats are very comfortable too. In fact, the seating position of the 1 Series is lovely and sporty. It feels like a proper driver's car. And that doesn't come at the cost to rear seat space either. Actually, in fact, there's good headroom and good legroom as well. Now, you might be thinking that that rear legroom would have compromised on boot space, but it's not bad at all. I mean, it's not the widest one here, but we've got a good amount of underfloor storage, and look how easy it is to access it. That's cool.
Another very worthy addition to our best hatchback list is the Dacia Sandero, which trades poshness and pizzazz for practicality and pound stretching. I mean, last gen Sanderos go for £7,000, and even the latest ones start at £8,000.
So, those are our picks from the world of the hatchback, and as we've shown you, they can actually be quite practical, although it is only a small step up to the even more practical world of the small SUV. And handily for you, we've already compiled our favourites from that world in this video over here.